Hey guys, I just wanted to give you a little intro to what you're going to be doing today to make sure you're on the right track and you're doing a good job. So, we are going to be talking about biological molecules. I'll write that up here. Biological molecules. All life depends on the properties and reactions of 4 classes of molecules, meaning there's just 4 different types, and that makes up everything we're made out of, everything and how we work, or what our structure is. When I say we, I mean living things. Another word for biological molecules, just in case you see it somewhere, is macromolecules. Same thing. When someone you see that's kind of interchangeable, it's like the 2 words that are referring to these 4 classes of molecules. So I want you to just take a second, so pause me after I ask you this question, but I want you to take a second and look at these figures, these molecule diagrams, and I want you to pick out all the patterns you're seeing, the similarities and the differences. I just really want you to sit and observe and tell me what you're finding. Okay, pause me and look at these molecules. Okay, so you should have paused me and come up with a bunch of different similarities and differences, but some things you should have been noticing. You should notice that the patterns are repeating. You see it over and over again there. You see it over and over again here. Here. And here. The oxygen, the nitrogen, okay. So they're made out of smaller pieces. You should also have noticed carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Who's this one? Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Carbon, hydrogen. All right, let me tell you what these are. This one is a carbohydrate. This molecule down here is a protein. This molecule here is a nucleic acid. And here we have a lipid. Those are the 4 classes of biological molecules. And they have very similar basic structures. So every type of lipid is going to have a very similar basic structure. Same with the carbohydrates. So you are going to have to be able to identify what type of molecule it is by looking at it, by knowing the properties, knowing the basic structure. Speaking of basic structure, these macromolecules are built, just like we saw over here, they're built out of building blocks. So they're one little unit is bonded together over and over again to make these big, huge macromolecules. And that beginning piece is called the building block is called a monomer. 1. And monomers bond to each other. Plus monomer, plus monomer. So you have a big, huge chain, and then you have a polymer. Latin root poly, many monomers. So here, we're looking up here at the, what is this? Here we're looking at the nucleic acids. Nucleic acid is the polymer. And the monomer is the nucleotide. And this right here, I put this picture here because this is such a basic structure, but you see it a lot. If we are quickly talking about nucleic acid, you'll see me draw this on the board. And you have to identify that I'm talking about a nucleotide. And a nucleotide consists of a phosphate group. So you have, look here, you learned that yesterday. And a sugar, so ribose in RNA, pentose in DNA. Oh, and the difference here is that oxygen. And then the last piece of a nucleotide is this nitrogenous base. This base. And there's 4 different bases. Well, actually 5 if we're in RNA. But these should look familiar. A, C, G, T, and U. Those are the bases. So that's the 3 parts of a nucleotide. And then the nucleotide bonds together. Oh, right here. Over and over again. And you get DNA or RNA. All right, let's go to the next one. So here we have our monosaccharides. Mono, 1, sugar. Saccharide is sugar. So we are talking about carbohydrates. Carbohydrates would be the, oh, I messed up. Would be the polymer, the monomer, the building block is the monosaccharide. So there's 2 different common structures for the monosaccharides. You have the chain structure or the ring structure. But if you look at it, it's the same thing. You learned how to read these yesterday, so it should look familiar. Some common monomers, monosaccharides, glucose, fructose, galactose, deoxyribose, ribose. So those are the monosaccharides you'll hear. All right, so now I'm going to move up here to lipids. So lipids would be the polymer, monomer. I hope you said polymer. The monomer is fatty acids. And it is a big, long hydrocarbon chain. And you learned about hydrocarbon chains yesterday, carbon and hydrogen. So one thing I wanted to point out to you here is there's 2 types. You have unsaturated fatty acids and saturated fatty acids. And this is going to come back later when we talk about the cell membrane, because it's part of why the cell membrane acts the way it does. But when you have a double bond in an unsaturated fatty acid, it bends that hydrocarbon chain. So now, this is going to be, and if it's in a structure, it's going to cause that structure to be a little bit more fluid. When it's a saturated fatty acid, it's a straight chain, all the fatty acids will build up on top of each other, be more a solid. So butter, so when you're kind of like a solid at room temperature, so butter is a saturated fatty acid, but like oils are unsaturated fatty acids. That double chain or that double bond causes the that fluidity. Something you need to pick up on is that the cell membrane is made out of lipids. We are going to talk about that forever. They're made out of these special lipids called phospholipids. And it is a lipid. There's your fatty acids. It just has a phosphate group at the head. So just wanted to point that out to you. All right, then the last one down here is our protein. So protein would be the, I hope you said, polymer. And what is the monomer? Oh, it's not written here anywhere. You should know. Amino acids. All right, and this is the basic structure of an amino acid. This is review. The carbon, the R group, carboxyl, amino. And this R group could be any of those 20 amino acids. And this should all be looking very, very familiar to you. All right. So now we know that we have these, I'm gonna go back to the big picture, these big biological molecules that do everything for us. All life depends on the properties and reactions. They're made out of building blocks. They're made out of monomers. Monomers are nucleotides, monosaccharides, fatty acids, and amino acids. Okay, so now simple organic molecules, they join together to form all the essential molecules needed for life. So we gotta get this bonding stuff going on. This is the important stuff. how do we get from a monomer to a polymer? And this is a very special type of chemical reaction. It is called, I'm not going to tell you what it's called yet because I have to tell you what it is first. So if you look here, oh man, you need to start being able to identify what these molecules are without being told. So you have a carbon, nitrogen, oxygen. This is a amino acid. So if we are joining two amino acids together, we are in the process of building a protein. So let's look and see what's happening here. We have this OH on the carboxyl end of the amino acid, and this hydrogen end on the amine part of the other amino acid. And what's happening? We have this peptide bond. Now it's bonded, but let's look and see what happened. All of a sudden, this C and this N is bonded together. I'm talking about this C and this N. Oops. This C and this N. So what happened? This happened. I was trying to make it look like a drop of water and it didn't work. H2O. So H2O is pulled out, and then those bond together in a protein. It's called a peptide bond. So you're losing water. Let's look at it for the carbohydrates over here. So we have two monosaccharides here and here. Let's look. We have OH, and we have this H here. That gets pulled out as H2O. And what is able to bond? That oxygen right here. And that is called a glycosidic bond. You have to know that in amino acids, it's or in a protein, it's peptide bonds, and in a carbohydrate, it's glycosidic bonds. But it is the same exact reaction. So we just lost water. When you lose water, there's a fancy name for this. So when you lose water, like if you're thirsty, you are dehydrated. This process, this chemical reaction, is called dehydration. And then you're building something, dehydration synthesis. Isn't that kind of cool? You should never forget that. This chemical reaction is called dehydration synthesis. Why? Tell me back. I can't hear you, but tell me back. You're losing water. Okay. So that's how you build these huge molecules, dehydration synthesis. So what happens when you need to break them down? And this is why we would need to break them down. Because, when bonds are formed, energy is released. Okay, cool. So we know that in these reactions, we just formed bonds, that energy was released. That's cool. And then we know here, to break a bond, energy must be absorbed. So to do this one, to break a bond, here, energy has to be absorbed. But this is the special part here. If more energy is released than absorbed, then it is an energy source. And that's how we get our ATP. That's how our bodies are run, is by these chemical reactions, breaking down and absorbing energy at a rate where more energy is released than absorbed, and that's how we power our bodies. So these reactions are super important. And you'll see when you do your assignment today that it has a lot to do, these macromolecules have a lot to do with energy. So, okay, anyways, how do we break a bond now? It is what we just talked about, dehydration synthesis, backwards. So instead of dehydrating it to bond it together, you are adding water to cut it apart. So water is hydro, cutting something is lysis. This process is hydrolysis. And look at what's happening here. You have this is our protein, right? Or polypeptide, I should say. You add water, and what happens? It bonds right back, just like what we started with up here. It separates them. And you know what kind of properties this is using? should go back to your water stations that I know you guys love so much. All right, so let's look at it for the sugars. Let's see if we can see it here too. We add our water. This bond breaks. The hydrogen is attracted to that oxygen. That oxygen is attracted to that hydrogen. And we broke our bond, hydrolysis. So that is how you simple organic molecules join together to form all the essential molecules needed for life. All right, that's all I have for you guys. Do your assignment that is assigned in your notebooks. Do a really good job. Use colors, use details. You need to understand this. So we just went over the kind of chemistry of these macromolecules. Now you kind of need to go through the bigger picture of why are these macromolecules so important to us? Where do we find them? How do we use them? And start practicing being able to identify. Let me go back to this slide. Being able to identify right away that this is a carbohydrate. If you ever see a molecule like this is a lipid, nucleic acid, and protein. So start practicing picking up on those patterns, picking out the monomers. Okay, have a good day. I will see you guys on Tuesday. Email me if you have any questions.